Hello everyone, and welcome back to another video from Gone Legends. In today's video, we'll be highlighting American celebrities who passed away today, and in recent days, along with other notable individuals from around the world. Before we proceed, we kindly ask for your support. If you find these tributes meaningful, please take a moment to like this video. It truly means a lot to us. Thank you for being here. And now, let's begin. 1.
Jennifer Runyon. Jennifer Runyon, the American actress known for her roles in classic 1980s films and television shows, passed away on March 6, 2026, at the age of 65 after battling cancer. Her passing saddened many fans who remembered her as a familiar and charming face from one of television's most beloved decades. She was born on April 1, 1960, in Chicago, Illinois, United States. Growing up during the rise of modern television entertainment, Jennifer developed a passion for acting. Her natural charm and expressive personality helped her enter the film and television industry during the early 1980s. Jennifer Runyon gained recognition through several film and television appearances. One of her most memorable roles came in the famous 1984 supernatural comedy Ghostbusters, a movie that became one of the most iconic films of its time. She also appeared in the popular sitcom Charles in Charge, which entertained millions of viewers across America. In addition to comedy, Jennifer demonstrated versatility by appearing in the long-running soap opera, Another World. Her performances showed warmth, sincerity, and a relatable presence that audiences appreciated. Throughout her career, she remained respected for her dedication to acting and her ability to connect with viewers. Even after her passing, Jennifer Runyon's work continues to live on through the films and television shows that once brought joy to millions of people.
2.
Mantana Morakul. Mantana Morakul, the legendary Thai singer and cultural icon, passed away on March 8, 2026, at the age of 102 due to natural causes associated with old age. Her death marked the end of a remarkable life that helped shape the golden era of Thai popular music. She was born on March 30, 1923, in Dusit District, Bangkok, Thailand. From an early age, Mantana showed an exceptional talent for singing. Her voice carried elegance and emotion, quickly attracting attention within Thailand's growing music scene. As she grew older, she became associated with the famous Suntaraporn Band, one of the most influential orchestras in Thai music history. Mantana Morakul became one of the earliest female performers of Luk Krung music, a genre that blended traditional Thai melodies with Western musical arrangements. Through radio broadcasts, recordings, and live performances, her songs reached listeners across the country. Her graceful voice and refined style made her one of the most respected singers of her generation. In recognition of her contributions to Thai culture, she was honored as a National Artist of Thailand in 2009. Even in her later years, Mantana remained a beloved cultural figure whose music represented a beautiful era of Thai entertainment. Although she has passed away, Mantana Morakul's voice continues to live on through the timeless songs she left behind.
3.
Dilworth Karaka. Dilworth Karaka, the respected New Zealand musician and lead singer of the influential band Herbs, passed away in March 2026 at the age of 75. His death marked the loss of a powerful voice in Pacific and New Zealand music. He was born in 1950 in New Zealand and grew up surrounded by the rich cultural traditions of the Pacific community. From an early age, Dilworth developed a passion for music and performance. His soulful voice and emotional delivery eventually led him to become the lead vocalist of Herbs, a band that would play a significant role in shaping the country's reggae and roots music movement. Formed in the late 1970s, Herbs became known for blending reggae rhythms with messages about social justice, indigenous identity, and political awareness. At the center of the band's music was Dilworth Karaka's distinctive voice, which brought depth and authenticity to their songs. One of their most famous songs, Sensitive to a Smile, became widely recognized and remains a beloved classic in New Zealand music. Through his work with Herbs, Dilworth helped represent the voices and experiences of Pacific communities. Even after decades in the music industry, he remained a respected cultural figure. Although Dilworth Karaka has passed away, the powerful messages in his music continue to inspire listeners across generations.
4.
Country Joe McDonald. Country Joe McDonald, the American singer, songwriter, and anti-war activist, passed away on March 7, 2026, at the age of 84 due to complications related to Parkinson's disease. He was widely known as one of the most recognizable voices of the 1960s counterculture movement. He was born Joseph Allen McDonald on January 1, 1942 in Washington, D.C., United States. During the politically turbulent 1960s, Joe became deeply involved in both music and activism. He formed the psychedelic rock band Country Joe and the Fish, whose songs often carried strong political messages. The band became famous for their protest anthem, "I Feel Like I'm Fixin' to Die Rag," a satirical song criticizing the Vietnam War. The song gained worldwide attention during Joe's unforgettable performance at the Woodstock Festival in 1969. Standing before a massive crowd, his performance became one of the most memorable moments in the history of rock music. Country Joe McDonald spent decades continuing to perform and record music. His work reflected the spirit of protest, freedom, and social awareness that defined the era. Even after his passing, his songs remain powerful reminders of a time when music became a voice for peace and change.
5.
Vidi Aldiano. Vidi Aldiano, the talented Indonesian pop singer and songwriter, passed away on March 7, 2006, at the age of 35 after a long battle with kidney cancer. His passing deeply saddened fans across Indonesia, who admired both his music and his inspiring courage. He was born on March 29, 1990, in Jakarta, Indonesia. From a young age, Vidi showed a strong passion for music and performing. His smooth voice and heartfelt style quickly captured the attention of listeners when he entered the Indonesian music industry. His debut album, Pelangi di Malam Hari, introduced him as a rising pop star. Several of his songs, including Nuansa Bening and Status Palsu, became extremely popular and helped establish his reputation as one of Indonesia's most promising young artists. Beyond his musical achievements, Vidi Aldiano was admired for his strength and honesty. When he was diagnosed with kidney cancer, he chose to openly share his journey with fans. Despite the difficult treatment and challenges he faced, he continued to perform and create music. His determination inspired many people who followed his story. Although his life ended far too early, Vidi Aldiano left behind a legacy of beautiful music and a powerful example of courage in the face of hardship.
6.
Antonio Marcina. Antonio Marcina, the Italian actor known for his roles in European action and spaghetti western films, passed away on March 6, 2026, at the age of 80 due to age-related health complications. His passing marked the loss of a familiar face from the golden era of Italian genre cinema. Born in 1945 in Italy, Marcina grew up during a time when Italian filmmaking was gaining international popularity. From an early age, he was drawn to the world of cinema and eventually pursued acting as a career. His strong appearance and confident screen presence helped him find roles in action films and Western-style productions that were widely produced across Italy in the 1960s and 1970s. One of his most notable appearances came in the 1976 cult classic Chi Elma, a film that later became one of the most respected entries in the spaghetti western genre. Marcina often portrayed intense supporting characters, adding strength and realism to the stories he helped bring to life. Although he rarely played leading roles, his contributions were important to the atmosphere and storytelling of many films during that era. Antonio Marcina remained a respected figure among fans of Italian cinema. Even after his passing, his performances continue to live on through the films that preserve his legacy.
7.
Christos Valavanitis. Christos Valavanitis, the respected Greek actor and poet, passed away on March 6, 2026 at the age of 81 due to complications related to age and health issues. His passing marked the loss of an influential figure in Greece's artistic and cultural world. He was born in 1944 in Greece, a country known for its deep history of theater and storytelling. Growing up in such a creative environment inspired Balavenditis to pursue acting. Over the years, he built a career that spanned theater, film, and television, becoming widely admired for his thoughtful and emotionally rich performances. Balavenidis appeared in several well-known Greek films, including The Wretches Are Still Singing, Loafing and Camouflage, and Crying, Silicon Tears. His acting style was subtle and expressive, allowing him to portray complex characters with depth and realism. In addition to acting, he was also a poet. Through poetry, he explored themes of human emotion, life, and society, further strengthening his reputation as a creative artist. Throughout his life, Christos Valavanidis remained respected by audiences and fellow artists alike. Even after his passing, his performances and literary works continue to reflect his dedication to Greek culture and the arts.
8.
Corey Parker. Corey Parker, the American actor recognized for his work in film, television, and theater, passed away in 2026 at the age of 60 due to reported health complications. His passing saddened many who appreciated his quiet but meaningful contributions to the performing arts. He was born in 1965 in New York City, United States. Growing up in a city famous for its theater and film culture greatly influenced Parker's interest in acting. Inspired by the vibrant creative environment around him, he pursued acting and began building a career in stage and screen productions. Corey Parker gained recognition through his role in the film Biloxi Blues, an adaptation of Neil Simon's well-known play. The story followed young soldiers during World War II training, and Parker's performance helped bring emotional realism to the film. Beyond cinema, he appeared in various television shows and stage performances. His acting style focused on natural dialogue and believable emotions, which allowed audiences to connect with his characters. Though he often appeared in supporting roles, Parker was respected for his professionalism and dedication. His work continues to be remembered through the productions he helped bring to life.
9.
Jānis Streks. Jānis Streks, the renowned Latvian film director, actor, and screenwriter, passed away in 2026 at the age of 89 due to age-related health complications. His death marked the loss of one of the most influential figures in Latvian cinema. He was born on September 26, 1936 in Latvia. Growing up during a time of cultural change, Streks developed a strong interest in art and storytelling. This passion eventually led him into filmmaking, where he became one of the most important directors in his country's cinematic history. Throughout his career, Streks created several films that became beloved classics. One of his most famous works, A Limousine in the Color of Midsummer's Night, captured humor, family relationships, and the spirit of Latvian life. Another well-known film, Theater, further demonstrated his talent for portraying emotional human stories. In addition to filmmaking, Streks was also known as a painter and cultural thinker. His artistic work extended beyond cinema and influenced Latvia's creative community. His films continue to represent an important chapter of Latvian culture, preserving the stories and emotions of the people he portrayed.
10.
Julia Fiona Roberts was born on October 28, 1967, in the small city of Smyrna, in the state of Georgia, United States of America. Today, she is known as one of the most recognizable actresses in the history of cinema, a woman whose radiant smile and natural charm helped define Hollywood for decades. But long before the world knew her as the beloved star of films like Pretty Woman, Erin Brockovich, and Notting Hill, Julia Roberts lived through a childhood shaped by loss, instability, and emotional hardship that few people truly understand. Behind the fame and glamour lies a story that began with struggle, uncertainty, and moments of deep personal pain that could easily have broken a lesser spirit. Julia was born into a family that loved the world of performance. Her parents, Walter Grady Roberts and Betty Lou Bredemus, were both involved in theater. They were actors and playwrights who ran a small acting workshop in Atlanta, where children came to learn the craft of performing. In many ways, Julia's earliest memories were filled with creativity and storytelling. The environment around her was artistic, lively, and full of imagination. But the reality of life inside the household was far more complicated than it appeared from the outside. Financial problems constantly weighed on the family. Running a small theater school did not bring much income, and the pressure of making ends meet created tension between Julia's parents. Arguments became more frequent, and the atmosphere inside the home slowly began to change. For a young child, these moments were confusing and frightening. Julia could sense that something was wrong, even if she could not yet fully understand what was happening. Eventually, the marriage between Walter Roberts and Betty Lou Berdemus collapsed. When Julia was still very young, her parents divorced. Divorce is always painful for a family, but for Julia, it marked the beginning of a childhood filled with emotional turbulence. Suddenly, the stable world she once knew had fractured. She now had to grow up between two different lives, two different homes, and two very different emotional realities. After the divorce, Julia's mother remarried a man named Michael Motes. At first, the marriage seemed like an opportunity for a fresh start, but over time, the situation inside the home became increasingly difficult. Reports from later years would describe a tense and troubled household environment. Arguments, emotional strain, and instability became common experiences for Julia and her siblings. Instead of feeling safe and secure, the young girl often found herself surrounded by conflict. While these problems were already difficult enough, an even greater tragedy soon arrived that would leave a permanent scar on Julia Roberts' life. In 1977, when Julia was only 10 years old, her biological father, Walter Roberts, died after battling cancer. Losing a parent is one of the most devastating experiences any child can face, and for Julia, the loss came at a time when she desperately needed stability and guidance. Her father had been a creative and supportive presence in her life, someone who understood the power of storytelling and performance. His death left an emptiness that could never truly be replaced. The grief that followed stayed with Julia for many years. Children often struggle to express pain in the same way adults do, and Julia was no different. The loss did not always appear on the surface, but it lived quietly inside her heart. That emotional depth, that sensitivity to human struggle would later become one of the defining qualities of her acting. But at the time, Julia was simply a young girl trying to navigate a complicated world. Her teenage years were far from glamorous. In school, she often felt awkward and unsure of herself. She was tall and lanky, sometimes self-conscious about her appearance, and far from the confident movie star that millions of people would later admire. Friends from those years would later recall that Julia had a vibrant personality, a sharp sense of humor, and an infectious laugh. Yet she still carried the quiet insecurity that many teenagers experience. Life in Smyrna, Georgia, was modest and simple. The town was quiet, far removed from the dazzling lights of Hollywood. No one around Julia imagined that this young girl would one day become one of the most famous actresses in the world. In fact, during her early teenage years, Julia herself did not even dream of becoming an actress. Her interests were surprisingly different. For a long time, she wanted to become a veterinarian because she loved animals and enjoyed caring for them. The idea of becoming a Hollywood star seemed distant and unrealistic. Acting was something her parents had done, something that existed in the background of her childhood, but it was not yet a personal ambition. However, destiny has a strange way of shaping our lives. Julia's older brother, Eric Roberts, had already begun building a career in Hollywood. Eric was talented and ambitious, and his success in the film industry slowly introduced Julia to the possibility that acting might also become her path. Watching his journey planted a small seed of curiosity in her mind. Her sister, Lisa Roberts Gillen, would also become involved in acting, making performance something of a family tradition. Even so, the idea of pursuing acting as a career still felt uncertain to Julia. She was young, unsure of herself, and still recovering emotionally from the difficulties of her childhood. Yet somewhere deep inside, a quiet determination was beginning to grow. The struggles she had faced, the loss of her father, the instability at home, the emotional confusion of her teenage years had created within her a strength she did not yet fully recognize. Many years later, people would say that Julia Roberts possessed an extraordinary ability to portray complex emotions on screen. She could make audiences laugh with genuine joy and moments later move them to tears with heartbreaking vulnerability. That emotional power did not come from nowhere. It was born from real experiences, real pain, real resilience. But in those early years, Julia Roberts was still standing at the beginning of her journey. She was just a young woman trying to decide what kind of future she wanted. And soon, a single bold decision would change everything. A decision that would take her far away from the quiet streets of Georgia and place her in the heart of one of the most competitive industries in the world. She would leave behind the familiar comfort of her hometown and travel to New York City, a place where dreams were both created and destroyed every single day. That move would mark the true beginning of Julia Roberts' journey toward fame. But the road ahead would not be easy. Before the world fell in love with her smile, before Hollywood crowned her the queen of romantic cinema, Julia Roberts would have to fight through rejection, uncertainty, and moments that would test her strength in ways she had never imagined. And the first step of that journey was about to begin. When Julia Fiona Roberts made the decision to leave Georgia, she was not stepping into a world of certainty. She was stepping into a storm of ambition, competition, and rejection that has crushed the dreams of countless young hopefuls before her. The bright lights of the entertainment industry may look magical from a distance, but the reality inside that world is often brutal. For every actor who succeeds, thousands disappear without a trace. Julia knew none of this with complete clarity when she first began considering the path of acting. She was still a young woman searching for direction. Yet the influence of her older brother Eric Roberts had begun to open her eyes to the possibilities that existed beyond the quiet life of Smyrna, Georgia. Eric had already established himself as a serious actor in Hollywood during the late 1970s and early 1980s. His performances had drawn attention, and his career was steadily growing. Watching him navigate the film industry created a mixture of admiration and curiosity within Julia. She began to wonder whether she might also belong in that world. Eventually, Julia Roberts made a life-changing decision. She would leave home and move to New York City. For a young woman in her early 20s, this decision was both thrilling and terrifying. New York was a city filled with opportunity, but it was also a place where dreams were tested every single day. The streets were crowded with artists, actors, musicians, and performers who had all come chasing the same goal. To succeed in New York required determination, patience, and the ability to endure disappointment without losing hope. Julia arrived in the city with very little experience and even fewer connections. She was not yet a polished actress. She had not attended prestigious drama schools or built an impressive resume of performances. What she had instead was something far more difficult to define. She had presence. There was something about Julia Roberts that people noticed immediately. It was not just her physical beauty, although that certainly played a role. It was the warmth in her personality, the openness in her expressions, and the natural charisma that made people feel connected to her almost instantly. But even charisma does not guarantee success. In New York, Julia began taking acting classes to improve her skills. She also worked as a model to support herself financially. Modeling was never her true passion, but it allowed her to earn enough money to survive while she pursued acting opportunities. Life during those early years was far from glamorous. Julia lived in modest apartments, shared living spaces with friends, and spent long hours attending auditions that often ended in rejection. Casting directors saw hundreds of aspiring actors every week, and many auditions lasted only a few minutes before the hopeful candidate was politely dismissed. Some days were encouraging, other days were crushing. There were moments when Julia wondered if she had made a mistake by leaving Georgia. The entertainment industry has a way of testing a person's confidence. Even talented individuals often begin to doubt themselves after hearing the word no again and again. Yet Julia Roberts refused to give up. There was a quiet determination inside her that continued pushing her forward. Each audition, each acting class, Each small opportunity helped her grow stronger and more confident. Eventually, that persistence began to pay off. Julia's first appearance in a film came in 1988 when she was cast in a small role in the movie Satisfaction. The film told the story of a young, all-female band trying to achieve success in the music industry. Although Julia's role was relatively minor, the experience gave her a valuable introduction to professional filmmaking. For the first time, she stood on a real movie set surrounded by cameras, lighting equipment, and experienced actors. It was an environment very different from the acting classes she had been attending in New York, and something inside Julia immediately felt right. She belonged there. Even though her role in Satisfaction was small, it opened the door to another opportunity that would become far more important. Later that same year, Julia Roberts was cast in a film called Mystic Pizza. At the time, Mystic Pizza was not expected to become a major Hollywood production. It was a modest independent film about three young women working at a pizza restaurant in a small coastal town in Connecticut. The story focused on friendship, love, and the emotional challenges of young adulthood. Julia played the character Daisy Araujo, a spirited and confident young woman who was navigating complicated relationships and personal ambitions. What happened during the filming of Mystic Pizza surprised many people involved in the production. Julia Roberts began to stand out. There was something remarkably authentic about her performance. She did not appear as if she were acting in the traditional sense. Instead, she seemed completely natural, as though the camera had simply captured a real person living through genuine emotions. Her laughter felt spontaneous, her sadness felt sincere. Her energy filled every scene. Critics who later reviewed the film quickly noticed Julia's presence. Even though Mystic Pizza itself was not a massive commercial success, many reviewers commented that a new star seemed to be emerging from the cast. Hollywood executives also began paying attention. Suddenly, Julia Roberts was no longer just another struggling actress attending endless auditions. She had proven that she could hold her own on screen and connect with audiences in a powerful way. The doors of opportunity began to open, but with opportunity also came pressure. Because Hollywood had now taken notice of Julia Roberts, expectations were rising quickly. Casting directors began to see her as a promising young actress who might soon become something much bigger. The next role she accepted would confirm that belief. In 1989, Julia Roberts joined the cast of a film called Steel Magnolias, a powerful drama about friendship, family, and resilience among a group of women living in Louisiana. The film featured an extraordinary cast that included Sally Field, Shirley MacLaine, Dolly Parton, and Olympia Dukakis, legendary actresses with decades of experience. Julia Roberts, still early in her career, suddenly found herself surrounded by some of the most respected performers in Hollywood. She was nervous, but she was also ready. Julia played the role of Shelby Eatonton Latchery, a young woman living with type 1 diabetes who refuses to allow her illness to control her life. Shelby dreams of love, family, and a future filled with possibility, even though her health creates constant risk. The role required deep emotional range. Shelby's story moves from joy to heartbreak, from hope to tragedy. And Julia Roberts had to carry those emotional shifts with honesty and vulnerability. When the film was released, audiences were deeply moved by her performance. One particular scene between Shelby and her mother became one of the most powerful moments in the entire film. Julia's portrayal captured the courage and fragility of a young woman determined to live fully despite knowing that her life might be cut short. Critics praised her performance with enthusiasm. And soon, Julia Roberts received her first Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress. It was an astonishing achievement for a young actress who had only recently arrived in Hollywood. But even greater things were about to happen, because the next role offered to Julia Roberts would change not only her career but the entire landscape of romantic cinema. A film that almost did not get made, a story that many studios believed would fail, and a character that would become one of the most iconic figures in movie history. The film was called Pretty Woman, and Julia Roberts was about to become a global superstar. By the end of the 1980s, Julia Fiona Roberts had already begun attracting attention in Hollywood. Her performance in Steel Magnolias had proven that she possessed emotional depth far beyond what many people expected from a young actress still early in her career. Yet despite the praise, Julia was not yet the global superstar that the world would soon recognize. She was still climbing, still searching for that one role that could transform everything. And then came a script that almost no one believed in. The story that would eventually become Pretty Woman was originally titled 3000s. It was not meant to be a light-hearted romantic comedy. The original version of the script was darker, grittier, and far less optimistic than the movie audiences would later fall in love with. The story centered on a wealthy businessman and a young woman working on the streets of Los Angeles, exploring themes of loneliness, power, and survival. Many studios hesitated. Some producers believed the story was too risky. Others doubted that audiences would connect with the characters. Several actors were considered for the roles before the project slowly began to take shape. Even the casting process itself became complicated and uncertain. When Julia Roberts was first considered for the role of Vivian Ward, she was still relatively unknown. Compared to many established actresses, she had far less experience. Some studio executives questioned whether she could carry a major film, but those who met her during auditions saw something extraordinary. Julia Roberts possessed a kind of warmth that could not be manufactured. Her smile was genuine, her energy filled the room, and her presence made people feel instantly comfortable. She did not perform the character of Vivian Ward as a stereotype or caricature. Instead, she brought humanity to the role. Vivian became a real person. A young woman with hopes, insecurities, humor, and dignity. When director Gary Marshall watched Julia read for the part, he saw the magic immediately. There was a spark between her and the character that felt authentic and powerful. Eventually, she was cast opposite actor Richard Gere, who would play the wealthy businessman Edward Lewis. Yet even after the casting decisions were made, the film itself faced uncertainty. The studio supporting the project at the time decided to abandon it, believing the story would not succeed commercially. For many actors, this moment could have meant the end of the opportunity, but fate intervened once again. The project was rescued by Disney's Touchstone Pictures, which saw potential in the story if it were reshaped into a romantic comedy rather than a dark drama. The tone of the film was rewritten, the dialogue adjusted, and the focus shifted toward humor, romance, and emotional connection. What began as a risky project suddenly transformed into something entirely different. Filming began in 1989, and although Julia Roberts was excited about the opportunity, she also felt enormous pressure. She was only in her early 20s and suddenly found herself carrying the lead role in a major Hollywood production. The responsibility was overwhelming. There were moments when Julia questioned whether she could truly live up to the expectations placed upon her. Acting alongside Richard Gere, who was already an established star, made the situation even more intimidating. But once the camera started rolling, something remarkable happened. Julia Roberts became Vivian Ward. Her performance felt effortless. She brought humor, intelligence, vulnerability, and confidence to the character in a way that made audiences instantly fall in love with her. Scenes that might have felt awkward or unrealistic instead became charming and heartfelt because of Julia's natural presence. Her laughter echoed through the film, her expressions told stories without words, and that now legendary smile became one of the most recognizable features in Hollywood history. The chemistry between Julia Roberts and Richard Gere was undeniable. Their interactions felt spontaneous, playful, and emotionally sincere. Together they created a story that audiences found irresistible. When Pretty Woman was finally released in 1990, no one could have predicted what would happen next. The film became an international phenomenon. Audiences around the world flooded theaters. People returned again and again to watch the story unfold. The movie's mix of romance, humor, and heartfelt emotion resonated deeply with viewers from many different cultures. What began as a modest romantic comedy exploded into one of the biggest box office successes of the year. Pretty Woman earned over $460 million worldwide, an astonishing achievement for a film that many studios had originally rejected. But perhaps the most remarkable outcome of the film's success was what it did for Julia Roberts. Overnight, she became a global superstar. Her face appeared on magazine covers across the world. Interviews, television appearances, and media attention followed everywhere she went. Suddenly, Julia Roberts was no longer just a rising actress. She was the new face of Hollywood. Fans admired her authenticity. Unlike many celebrities who seemed distant or mysterious, Julia appeared approachable and genuine. She laughed easily, spoke openly, and did not try to hide her personality. But the rapid rise to fame also brought a darker side. The media attention became relentless. Every decision she made, every relationship she entered, every personal moment in her life was suddenly under intense public scrutiny. Tabloids competed to publish stories about her private life, often exaggerating or distorting the truth. For someone who had grown up in a relatively quiet town in Georgia, this level of attention could feel overwhelming. Julia Roberts was learning firsthand that fame comes with a heavy price. Despite the pressure, she continued working. Her performance in Pretty Woman earned her a second Academy Award nomination, this time for Best Actress. It was an extraordinary recognition for someone so early in her career. Yet while the world celebrated her success, Julia herself was still adjusting to the sudden transformation of her life. Only a few years earlier, she had been attending acting classes in New York, struggling through auditions and uncertain about her future. Now she was one of the most famous women on the planet. The contrast was almost surreal. But Hollywood has a habit of placing enormous expectations on rising stars. Success often brings even greater pressure to maintain that success. People began wondering whether Julia Roberts could continue delivering performances that matched the magic of Pretty Woman. Was she simply the star of one unforgettable film? Or was she about to become something even greater? Julia Roberts was determined to prove that her talent extended far beyond one iconic role. The next decade of her career would answer that question. Because the 1990s would transform Julia Roberts from a promising young star into one of the most powerful actresses in the world. After the extraordinary success of Pretty Woman in 1990, Julia Fiona Roberts was no longer simply an actress rising through Hollywood. She had become something much larger, a global icon almost overnight. Millions of people around the world suddenly knew her name, recognized her face, and associated her radiant smile with romance, joy, and cinematic magic. But while audiences saw a fairy tale rise to fame, Julia herself was beginning to experience the heavy reality that often hides behind success. Fame can feel like standing under an enormous spotlight that never turns off. Every move is observed, every decision judged, and every mistake magnified. For Julia Roberts, the early 1990s became a period where the world seemed endlessly fascinated not only with her career, but also with her private life. The attention was relentless. Journalists followed her everywhere. Tabloid magazines printed stories about her relationships, her friendships, even her personality. Some reports praised her as Hollywood's newest sweetheart. Others tried to paint her as difficult or unpredictable. In an industry driven by gossip and speculation, Julia quickly learned that fame could be both a blessing and a burden. One of the most painful moments during this period involved her relationship with actor Kiefer Sutherland. The two met while filming the movie Flatliners in 1990, and their connection developed quickly. They fell deeply in love, and soon the relationship became one of the most talked about romances in Hollywood. Fans adored the couple. Their chemistry seemed real, spontaneous, and full of promise. Eventually, they became engaged, and plans were made for a wedding that captured the attention of the media across the world. But just days before the ceremony was supposed to take place, the relationship collapsed. The breakup became a public scandal. Newspapers and television shows reported on the situation endlessly, analyzing every detail and speculation surrounding the separation. For Julia Roberts, this was not simply a failed relationship. It was a deeply personal heartbreak playing out under the unforgiving glare of global attention. Instead of being allowed privacy to process her emotions, she found herself surrounded by cameras and reporters asking painful questions. The experience was humiliating and emotionally exhausting. For someone who had already struggled with instability and loss during childhood, this moment became one of the most difficult chapters of her adult life. Julia Roberts later admitted that fame at such a young age had been overwhelming. She had suddenly become one of the most recognizable women on Earth, yet she was still learning how to navigate adulthood, relationships, and personal identity. But despite the emotional challenges she faced, Julia refused to allow the chaos of her personal life to destroy her career. She continued working. In 1991, she appeared in the psychological thriller Sleeping with the Enemy. The film told the story of a woman escaping an abusive marriage and trying to rebuild her life under a new identity. The role required Julia to explore darker emotional territory than audiences had previously seen from her. Her character, Laura Burney, lives in constant fear of her violent husband while secretly planning her escape. The film blends suspense with emotional drama, forcing Julia to portray both vulnerability and determination. The performance surprised many viewers. Until then, many people associated Julia Roberts primarily with romantic comedy and charm. But in Sleeping with the Enemy, she demonstrated that she could also portray fear, strength, and survival. The movie became a commercial success and further proved that Julia's talent extended beyond lighthearted roles. Still, the pressure surrounding her continued to grow. The early 1990s were a complicated time in Julia Roberts' life. While her career moved forward, she often struggled internally with the demands of fame and the intense scrutiny from the media. Interviews from that period sometimes revealed a young woman who felt misunderstood by the public image created around her. People expected her to always be the cheerful star with the famous smile. But behind that image was a human being dealing with stress, exhaustion, and emotional wounds. In 1991, Julia made another surprising personal decision that shocked many fans and reporters. She married country singer Lyle Lovett. The two had met only a few weeks earlier before deciding to marry in a private ceremony. The suddenness of the relationship fascinated the media. Some people saw the marriage as romantic and spontaneous. Others criticized it as impulsive. Unfortunately, the marriage did not last long. Within less than 2 years, Julia Roberts and Lyle Lovett divorced. For Julia, this became yet another moment when her personal life was dissected publicly. Headlines speculated about what had gone wrong, creating narratives that often ignored the emotional complexity of real human relationships. These experiences taught Julia Roberts an important lesson about the world she had entered. In Hollywood, privacy can disappear, but even as her personal life faced turbulence, Julia's professional career continued evolving. In 1993, she starred alongside Denzel Washington in the political thriller The Pelican Brief, based on the best-selling novel by John Grisham. The film follows a young law student who uncovers a conspiracy involving powerful political figures. Julia played Darby Shaw, a determined woman whose intelligence and courage place her in danger as she attempts to expose the truth. Working with Denzel Washington gave Julia the opportunity to show a different dimension of her acting ability. Their on-screen partnership brought tension, intelligence, and emotional authenticity to the story. Once again, Julia Roberts proved that she was capable of handling complex roles that required strength and intelligence rather than just romantic charm. Yet despite her professional achievements, the emotional weight of fame continued to follow her. Being one of Hollywood's most visible stars meant that every success came with equal scrutiny. Critics sometimes questioned her acting choices. Reporters speculated about her personality. The pressure of constant attention sometimes made her feel isolated. There were moments when Julia Roberts considered stepping away from Hollywood altogether. She once admitted that the industry could feel overwhelming, and there were times when she simply wanted to live a normal life away from cameras and expectations. But something inside her refused to give up. Perhaps it was the resilience she had developed during childhood. Perhaps it was the memory of her father's love for storytelling. Or perhaps it was the realization that acting was more than just a career for her. It was a way to express emotion, to connect with audiences, and to transform personal experiences into meaningful performances. Whatever the reason, Julia Roberts continued forward, and the next phase of her career would reveal something extraordinary. Because the world had not yet seen the full range of what Julia Roberts was capable of becoming, the most powerful performance of her life. The role that would finally bring her the Academy Award for Best Actress was still waiting ahead. By the middle of the 1990s, Julia Fiona Roberts had already experienced more emotional highs and lows than many actors face in an entire lifetime. She had known the dizzying thrill of worldwide fame after Pretty Woman. She had endured public heartbreak, relentless media attention, and the pressure of being labeled Hollywood's newest superstar. For a while, it seemed as though the world was constantly watching her, waiting to see whether she would rise even higher or quietly fade away. But Julia Roberts was not ready to disappear. In fact, the next chapter of her career would prove that she was not simply a temporary sensation. She was something much more powerful, a performer capable of redefining her place in Hollywood again and again. During the early and mid-1990s, Julia began choosing projects more carefully. She wanted roles that allowed her to explore different personalities, emotions, and stories, rather than repeating the same formula that had made her famous. At times, this strategy confused critics. Some films performed well, while others struggled at the box office. The entertainment press occasionally questioned whether Julia Roberts had lost the magical spark that once captivated audiences around the world. But Julia remained patient. She understood something that many young actors struggle to learn. Careers in Hollywood are rarely defined by a single moment. They are shaped by persistence, resilience, and the willingness to evolve. And in 1997, Julia Roberts reminded the world exactly why audiences had fallen in love with her. That year, she starred in the romantic comedy My Best Friend's Wedding. The story was refreshingly different from typical romantic films. Julia played Julianne Potter, a woman who suddenly realizes she is in love with her best friend, only days before he is about to marry someone else. Instead of portraying the sweet and innocent heroine that audiences expected, Julia's character was complicated, flawed, and sometimes even selfish. Julianne tries to sabotage the wedding. She manipulates situations, struggles with jealousy, and ultimately confronts the painful realization that love does not always lead to a happy ending. This bold storytelling choice gave Julia Roberts an opportunity to show a new dimension of her acting. Rather than playing the perfect romantic lead, she portrayed a woman dealing with regret, confusion, and emotional vulnerability. Audiences responded with enthusiasm. My Best Friend's Wedding became one of the biggest films of the year. Viewers appreciated the honesty of the story, and Julia's performance felt authentic and relatable. Once again, her laughter, expressions, and emotional sincerity made the character feel completely real. Hollywood had its answer. Julia Roberts had not lost her magic. She had simply grown stronger, but even greater success was waiting just around the corner. In 1999, Julia Roberts starred in another romantic comedy that would become one of the most beloved films of her career. The movie was Notting Hill, set in the charming streets of London. The story followed an ordinary bookstore owner named William Thacker, played by Hugh Grant, whose life unexpectedly changes when he meets a famous Hollywood actress named Anna Scott. Julia Roberts played Anna Scott. The role carried an interesting twist because the character mirrored aspects of Julia's own life. Anna Scott was a global movie star constantly surrounded by photographers, fans, and the pressures of fame. Through the story, audiences glimpsed the emotional loneliness that can accompany celebrity status. Julia brought remarkable depth to the character. Instead of portraying Anna Scott as glamorous and untouchable, she revealed the vulnerability behind the fame. One of the film's most unforgettable moments occurs when Anna quietly says, "I'm just a girl," standing in front of a boy, asking him to love her. The line became iconic, and Julia Roberts delivered it with such sincerity that millions of viewers felt the emotional weight of that simple sentence. Notting Hill was a massive international success. The film grossed hundreds of millions of dollars worldwide and reinforced Julia Roberts' reputation as the most beloved romantic comedy actress of her generation. By the end of the 1990s, Julia had earned a new title in Hollywood. She was now widely known as the Queen of Romantic Comedy. But while audiences adored her performances in love stories, Julia Roberts herself was beginning to search for something deeper. She wanted to prove that her abilities extended beyond charming romances and heartfelt laughter. She wanted a role that challenged her completely. A role that would test her strength as an actress and reveal the full emotional power she carried within. That opportunity arrived in the year 2000, and it would transform Julia Roberts' career forever. The film was Erin Brockovich. Unlike her previous romantic roles, this story was based on the real-life journey of a determined single mother who challenged a powerful corporation accused of poisoning the water supply of a small California town. The character Erin Brockovich was bold, outspoken, fearless, and fiercely protective of ordinary people who had been ignored by powerful institutions. It was a role unlike anything Julia Roberts had played before, and it demanded everything she had: emotion, strength, anger, compassion. When Julia Roberts accepted the role, many people in Hollywood were curious to see whether the beloved romantic star could truly transform herself into such a powerful, dramatic figure. But Julia was ready. She had spent years preparing through life experiences, personal struggles, and emotional growth. The performance she was about to deliver would not only silence her critics, it would earn her the highest honor in the world of cinema, an Academy Award. And it would prove that Julia Roberts was not just a star. She was a legend in the making. As the new millennium approached, Julia Fiona Roberts stood at a turning point in her career. For nearly a decade, she had been adored by audiences around the world, celebrated as the charming and magnetic star who could light up any romantic comedy. Her smile had become iconic, her laughter instantly recognizable. Yet Julia herself knew that her journey as an actress had not yet reached its true peak. She wanted something deeper. She wanted a role that demanded more than charm, a role that allowed her to explore courage, determination, anger, compassion, and the raw emotional strength that had been quietly building inside her for years. That opportunity arrived with a script based on a true story. The film was called Erin Brockovich. At first glance, the story did not resemble a typical Hollywood blockbuster. There were no explosions, no fantasy worlds, no glamorous romance. Instead, the film told the story of a single mother struggling to raise her children while fighting a powerful corporation accused of contaminating the water supply of a small California town. But beneath that simple premise was something extraordinary. It was a story about courage, about an ordinary woman who refused to stay silent when she discovered injustice. And it was exactly the kind of role Julia Roberts had been waiting for. The real Erin Brockovich was known for her fierce personality and unbreakable determination. She was outspoken, bold, and unapologetically confident, even when facing powerful legal institutions and corporate giants. Julia Roberts understood immediately that this role required authenticity. She could not approach it as a glamorous movie character. She needed to capture the real human spirit of Erin Brockovich. The frustration, the courage, the humor, and the relentless determination to seek justice for people who had been ignored. To prepare for the role, Julia spent time studying the real Erin Brockovich. She observed the way she spoke, the energy she carried, and the fearless attitude that had allowed her to challenge an enormous corporation. The transformation was remarkable. When filming began, Julia Roberts seemed to disappear inside the character. She spoke with the same sharp confidence. She carried herself with the same fearless determination. She portrayed Erin Brockovich not as a perfect hero, but as a complex woman struggling with her own problems while trying to help others. The story followed Erin's investigation into the Pacific Gas and Electric Company, which had been accused of contaminating groundwater with a toxic chemical known as hexavalent chromium. Residents of the small town of Hinckley, California, had suffered severe health problems, including cancer and other illnesses. Erin Brockovich refused to ignore what she discovered. Despite having no formal legal education, she began collecting medical records, interviewing families, and building a case that eventually became one of the largest environmental lawsuits in American history. Julia Roberts portrayed these moments with incredible intensity. There were scenes filled with anger as Erin confronted corporate lawyers. There were quiet moments of exhaustion as she struggled to balance motherhood with her relentless investigation. And there were powerful scenes of compassion as she listened to families describe the devastating effects of the contaminated water. Audiences could feel the emotional weight of every moment. Julia Roberts was no longer the romantic heroine audiences had come to expect. She had transformed into a fierce advocate for justice. When Erin Brockovich was released in the year 2000, critics responded with overwhelming praise. Reviewers across the world recognized that Julia Roberts had delivered the most powerful performance of her career. Her portrayal felt authentic, emotional, and deeply inspiring. The film itself became a major success, earning over $250 million worldwide and capturing the attention of audiences who were moved by the story's real-life significance. But the most important moment came during the 73rd Academy Awards. Julia Roberts was nominated for Best Actress. On the night of the ceremony, as the envelope was opened and her name was announced, the entire audience erupted in applause. Julia Roberts had won the Academy Award for Best Actress. As she walked onto the stage, her face filled with emotion, the moment represented far more than a trophy. It symbolized the long journey she had traveled from the uncertain girl growing up in Georgia to heartbreak and media scrutiny through years of proving herself again and again. Now, she had reached the highest level of recognition in the film industry. Her acceptance speech became one of the most memorable in Oscar history. Julia laughed, cried, and thanked the many people who had supported her throughout her journey. Her joy felt genuine and contagious, reflecting the same authenticity that audiences had loved for years. But the impact of Erin Brockovich did not end with the Oscar. The film changed Julia Roberts' position within Hollywood. She was no longer simply a beloved star. She was now one of the most respected actresses in the world. Soon after, she made history once again. Julia Roberts became the first actress in Hollywood to earn $20 million for a single film, setting a new standard for female performers in the industry, at a time when actresses were often paid significantly less than their male counterparts. This achievement represented a powerful shift. Julia's success proved that women could lead blockbuster films and command equal recognition for their talent. Her victory was not only personal, it helped open doors for future generations of actresses. Yet despite all the fame, awards, and financial success, Julia Roberts was beginning to realize that something else mattered even more. Peace, stability, a life beyond the endless attention of Hollywood. And soon, she would find that balance in an unexpected place through love, family, and a quieter chapter of her life that would reshape her priorities forever. By the early 2000s, Julia Fiona Roberts had achieved something very few actors in the history of Hollywood ever experienced. She was not only a global movie star, but also an Academy Award winner, one of the highest-paid actresses in the industry, and a performer whose name alone could attract millions of viewers to theaters. But behind the success, Julia Roberts was beginning to realize that fame could never be the only source of happiness. For more than a decade, her life had been filled with cameras, premieres, interviews, and the constant expectations of Hollywood. The world admired her glamorous career, but few people truly understood how exhausting that level of attention could become. Julia had already experienced heartbreak, public criticism, and the emotional strain of living in the spotlight. The question that slowly began forming in her mind was simple but deeply important. What kind of life did she truly want? While she continued working in films, Julia Roberts also began searching for something more personal, something that could give her a sense of stability beyond the unpredictable world of fame. Around this time, she joined the cast of a major Hollywood production that would introduce her to someone who would change her life forever. The film was The Mexican, released in 2001. During the production of this movie, Julia met Daniel Motter, a cinematographer working behind the scenes. Unlike many people Julia had encountered in Hollywood, Daniel was not a celebrity seeking attention. He worked quietly behind the camera, focusing on the technical artistry of filmmaking rather than the spotlight of fame. At first, their connection was simply professional, but as time passed, a deeper bond began to form between them. Daniel's calm personality and grounded perspective offered Julia something she had rarely experienced in Hollywood relationships: genuine stability. Their relationship grew stronger, and eventually, the two decided to build a life together. In 2002, Julia Roberts married Daniel Motter in a private ceremony at her ranch in Taos, New Mexico. Unlike the highly publicized relationships she had experienced earlier in her life, this marriage was intentionally kept away from the glare of media attention. Julia and Daniel both valued privacy, and they made a conscious effort to protect their personal lives from the endless curiosity of the press. For Julia Roberts, this relationship brought something she had long been searching for: peace, a sense of normalcy, and soon an even greater transformation arrived: motherhood. In 2004, Julia Roberts gave birth to twins, Hazel Patricia Motter and Phineas Walter Motter. 2 years later, in 2007, she and Daniel welcomed their third child, a son named Henry Daniel Motter. Becoming a mother changed Julia Roberts in ways that fame never could. For the first time in many years, the center of her life shifted away from film sets and Hollywood premieres. Instead of constant travel and media appearances, her daily life became focused on raising her children and creating a stable family environment. Julia often spoke about how motherhood reshaped her priorities. She began choosing film roles more carefully, selecting projects that allowed her to balance work with family life. She was no longer chasing fame. She had already achieved that. Now she wanted something deeper, despite stepping back from the relentless pace of Hollywood. Julia Roberts continued to appear in significant films during the early 2000s. One of her most notable roles during this period came in Ocean's 11, released in 2001. The film featured an ensemble cast, including George Clooney, Brad Pitt, Matt Damon, and Don Cheadle, creating one of the most star-studded productions of the decade. Julia played Tess Ocean,